Are you folks ready to kick things off? Okay, let's start off with something really positive, and I'll start us off just because somebody gets to go first. And I'm Carl Perry. I'm the Assistant Majority Leader, and I really enjoy being here at the Capitol. We're doing a lot of right things. We only have like 9 days left. The next 2 weeks, 4 days each, and then we have veto days. So we're getting toward the end. And so every now and then when you get toward the end, things get a little bit more strenuous and stressful. But let's talk about something really positive today. I hope you guys asked this question about the State of the Union, because I've been hoping to tell you about Captain Williams, the 100-year-old person that received the Medal of Honor. I thought that was just awesome. And so I don't think that's anything that can be controversial, so you can put that in the news. And for number of drafts now, we have 1,805. And what a draft is something that the Legislative Research Council is working on, and it could be an amendment, it could be a bill, but it doesn't necessarily mean it becomes a bill or it becomes an amendment, but that's what they're working on. House bills, we have the 325, and Senate bills, the 245. And so you're probably wondering, how many bills has the governor signed? I know he's got a bunch on his desk yet, but he's actually signed 27 House bills, and the Senate is winning right now. We have 31 Senate bills that have been signed by the great governor and the great state of South Dakota. Thank you.
Well, I'll pick it up from there. We have some things on the floor today. I believe there's 5 appropriation bills that we'll take up on the Senate floor. One of them is for money to support the Ellsworth infrastructure. There's a bill, I think that's $8 million. There's $5 million for rural infrastructure. $3 million, I think, for water projects, and $50,000 to study juvenile issues and how we deal with the correctional problems that we have, or the lack of options in dealing with juveniles with our current corrections. So those are some of the things we'll be taking up on the floor. Obviously, if we pass all of our one-time monies, I think will come out around 11.5% in our reserves when we're done. If some of those items don't manage to get 2/3, we'll probably wind up with a little bit more falling to the bottom line. And those are all issues that we'll be working through in the next few days. And hopefully we'll present a G-bill that gets good support and takes care of the people of South Dakota.
Well, thank you for being here. Scott Odenbach, District 31 from Spearfish. I'd say some of the highlights so far this week was crossover day in the House of Representatives. We were done, took all our bills, all the Senate bills done by 4:15 p.m. Folks who've been around here a long time, been observers of the process, have said they haven't ever seen the House run better. And I've said that was my goal from the beginning as Majority Leader. And so as far as that box, I think we can check it off at least to this point. But I always caution people, be careful around here. Things can go off the rails in a big hurry, so don't crow too loud. As was talked about a little bit, I mean, outstanding issues remaining would be, of course, the governor's original budget was 0% for the big 3, as they say. So there's ongoing discussions as the new numbers came in. There was immediately ideas to bump that up. Is it 1%? Is it 2%? Is it somewhere in between? There's also still discussions of various ideas for property tax relief that are still in play. I had a bill that did advance to the Senate that we're still working on that tries to begin to balance out using an Olympic averaging method like we did with ag, people's valuations, because that's the number one thing that you hear about in the areas that are the most affected is, hey, my valuation spiked in a big way really since 2020 when we invited the whole world to move to South Dakota. So we're working with the administration and other smart people in revenue to see if we can come up with something that's workable. Anytime you do a change like that, you've got all the people who administer things who immediately come back, and that's just on almost everything around here. When you have a bill that reforms something, you have a parade of folks coming in saying, here's 10 reasons why we can't do that. And the goal, if you're gonna try to affect change, is to try to figure out a way to make some of these reforms workable. Other than that, just want to hear your guys' questions. I'm sure you're loaded with a bunch of them, so that's what we got.
Yesterday, I had asked Senator Carr if he was worried that Senator Carley's behavior had set a precedent that could be problematic for the rest of the legislature. He had said it was the Supreme Court's decision that has incentivized the gamesmanship we saw where Senator Carley had left. I'm curious if that is the sentiment that the leadership of the legislature shares with Senator Carr, or if they see it differently.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Well, I guess I would first start off by saying that a legislator individually taking a walk on a bill to avoid taking a hard vote is not uncommon. It's something that's happened a lot over the years. I've never done it. I stand and vote on every bill that comes before me. I don't walk off the floor because I don't want my constituents to know where I stand on an issue. But having said that, that's not uncommon for that to happen. But what makes it a little bit more, for lack of a better term, emotional is now we've had the executive branch and the judicial branch have kind of meddled in the way the Senate operates our chamber. And they've created a situation where taking a walk on a bill can actually affect final passage by, a bill that fails 17-16, the lieutenant governor doesn't get to weigh in on. A bill that fails 17-17 is something that the governor can weigh in on, or the lieutenant governor can weigh in on and affect final passage of a bill. And that happened. There were 3 items up for reconsideration, I believe. And Senator Carley chose to take a walk on those. And the folks who supported that, and frankly, I supported those bills, were upset because his absence affected the final passage. Now that goes farther than that because the prior day we had a call to the House because another senator was off the floor. I'm not going to say what his motivation was, but I suspect when the call to the floor happened, he asked if he could abstain. So I would say his motivation was to affect final passage on one of those bills. So that's where we're at. And when you have a senator leave without, just go AWOL, they disenfranchise their district because they're not only affecting that one bill by not voting on it, they're leaving their district unrepresentative for every bill that comes up in the House. So that's where we're at, not the House, the Senate. Sorry to implicate you fellas. But so that's the situation that we're dealing with. And tempers flare, and we had to manage what we had to manage, and I think we got through and used the procedural tools that we had available to us. One of the things that happened, everything came off consent, so we called the question on every consent item, so we didn't wind up with, being there till midnight debating bills that had previously been on consent. So that's my view of how it goes, and if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Where are you guys at on any potential retribution as a caucus or a chamber?
Well, we're discussing that currently, but as I said at the beginning of my remarks, Senator Carley is not the first senator to ever take a walk on a bill or to be absent without leave. So on the one hand, it's very upsetting that he did that, especially for those who had an interest in some of those bills passing. You know, and frankly, we don't even know what the lieutenant governor would have done had he been there to effect a 17-17 tie. Because the day before, the lieutenant governor had an opportunity to vote on one of those bills and chose not to. He declared it having lost because it didn't have 18 votes. So those things are all speculative. So now, as time has gone on, Senator Roll didn't do anything outside the rules. The rules allow for everything that he did that caused some consternation on the floor. And likewise, like I said before, Senator Carley being absent, that's not the first time that's ever happened. And as far as I'm aware, there's never been a punishment meted out for somebody taking a walk on a bill or being absent without leave.
So it's unlikely we'll see anything else from here other than comments.
Well, we're discussing it, and we've had discussions in caucus, which will stay in caucus. But, yeah, so I would say at this point, maybe, but frankly, I would not recommend doing any further punishment, because I think all it would do is possibly lead to more disruption, which I'm trying to avoid.
Just to follow up on that, what has changed this year? I mean, that's been in the Constitution, the lieutenant governor being able to break a tie has been in the Constitution since 1889. And so what has changed, if anything, this year?
Well, what's changed is we have a senator absent due to health issues. So we have 34, so where we actually do have a tie. Now, in the past, I think the Senate has been allowed to govern itself. And there's conflicting language in the Constitution. One says that the lieutenant governor can vote to break a tie, but there's also language that says it takes 18 members elect on final passage of the bill. Well, I would suggest that the lieutenant governor is not a member-elect of the Senate. He's a member of the executive branch that performs a legislative function. So what's changed is that the Supreme Court has weighed in at the request of the governor that apparently the lieutenant governor is a member-elect. So that's what's changed, and that's why we are where we're at in the Senate.
And Grant Green from Dakota News Now. I mean, Senator Carr took issue with that, saying he doesn't believe that the lieutenant governor is a member-elect, but obviously the irony being that he's a former state representative in this case. But in general, is he not a member? I mean, you elect the governor, right? And so, like, the idea is any decision that he makes would be like a representation of the people's wishes. So I mean, is it a technicality issue? Because I kind of see as he's a member-elect.
I don't see it that way. Now, the 5 Supreme Court justices have weighed in that the lieutenant governor can vote on a 17-17 tie, and that in their view that his vote counts for final passage. But I would again say that that is arguable. And we have seen the Supreme Court go back on itself in the past with respect to the conflict issue, what constitutes a conflict for a member of the legislature. So they've gone both ways on that. We finally got clarity last year, if you remember, and people can have differing opinions. I don't think the lieutenant governor is a member-elect, but the Supreme Court does, and I respect that because they're the Supreme Court.
Obviously, we can't get too in the weeds of what happens in a private caucus, but what is the tenor of the conversations looking like as we're moving past this and into the home stretch of the legislative session?
I think the caucus is invested in doing the people's business with as little disruption as possible going forward. And that's what we'll do.
There's a bill that looks like I think its last step is gonna have to go through the House, that's to institute some parental rights. I apologize, I don't have the bill number offhand. But I guess thank you. You know, in House State Affairs, one of the things I was having a hard time hearing was, what is it that a parent doesn't currently have a right to do that this bill gives them the right to do? Could you clarify that for me?
For me, and, you know, and I've not read that bill, it's been a while since we took that up, but I think some of the meat of that is what information can be held from parents by school staff, school counselors, and mental health counselors. And a lot of that was reflected in gender identity. You have to let parents know if a child is at school claiming a gender that they weren't assigned at birth, that the parents need to be made aware of that. So, among other things, but I think that's probably one of the main talking points. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in counseling relationships that I think parents need to be made aware of, because that's where the rubber meets the road, and they need to know what's happening with their kids, because that affects other decisions that are made.
This week, or yesterday, the Senate gave final approval to the SNAP waiver despite the governor's objections. And I just wondered if I could hear from each of you, what was not convincing in the governor's opposition to it?
Let the House guys answer.
Yeah, what the hell?
I guess I don't know the answer as far as what was not convincing in that. I guess I'd reframe it as what was convincing, and certainly for me, it was a convincing bill. I had the same bill drafted months ago, and glad Rep. Rayfelt ran that bill. It's a good idea. Frankly, many of us think it maybe doesn't go far enough. If we look at the bigger picture of what sort of health choices government policy is subsidizing, that research shows have negative outcomes for people's health, and then we're also subsidizing their care when they have to end up in the hospital if they consume some of these products. I think it was smart to make that part of the public policy debate over which foods we should be subsidizing.
Well, it's been a while since we took that bill up, but when I was lobbied by the governor's people, and I'm not meaning to put words in the governor's mouth, I was told that he was wanting to wait for the federal to take over so it wouldn't cost us money. He was worried about the money that it was going to cost us to enforce this if we passed it before the federal mandates came down. But that was quite a while ago when the House took that bill under it. Things could have changed. I don't know.
One of the arguments that was against this bill was that it didn't go farther enough, and it didn't have all the provisions. It didn't have the candy bars and things like that. Well, it just was mainly on soda, and no soda, and the answer was no to soda and yes to SNAP. That's kind of where it came out. It is an interesting bill. It is an important bill, and I think it will go through. And I think the governor will sign it. The reason for that is it's moving in the right direction. It is not solving everything. And the people that put the bill together know that it doesn't solve everything. But the people that looked at it and said, this does help. And so it is a help. It will be better it's a bite of the apple, as I say. It is not eating the whole apple at one time.
Frankly, we'd be better off if we all ate an apple.
I would just wrap up with that I thought the arguments that the money that we save in the health issues that some of the sugary drinks bring more than offset the increased costs of administering the program at the agency level.
So as we look down to the home stretch, we've seen a lot of the property tax bills killed and some alive. Where do the respective caucuses see maybe this actually going, or what are the ideas being floated as legitimate ways to get meaningful property tax relief with a couple weeks left?
Well, I'd say the conversations aren't over yet. I'd say that's why we have vehicle bills and things like that for the end. And people sometimes criticize doing that, but as I've seen play out this session, you do kind of have to wait and see how all the individual bills that are out there and everybody's ideas play out. You got to kind of see what passes and what fails. And as you see the things that drop off and fail, it begins to concentrate the mind of folks of, okay, and you just have to get a better idea as well as you watch the process unfold of what may be able to get to a majority. Bottom line is you've got to have the votes. And so we're having ongoing discussions, at least within the House caucus, about what ideas, what ways are left. And if you're honest about it, the ways to cut property taxes really either means you are going to cut spending, and you either do that, local people forcing schools and counties to cut spending, or the state puts guardrails on that forces spending cuts, or you find different sources of revenue to offset it. Is it sales tax when the 4.2 thing sunsets next year? There was a bill that failed just the other day that would raise the sales tax to 5%. There's the governor's proposal out there to let counties have the option of 0.5%. Somewhere in all that, I believe there's a package of bills together that may take, maybe it's a piece of sales tax, maybe it's what we've got out there with Olympic averaging, or, more smoothing out the valuations for people. There's a bill still alive that has to deal with when there is a tax increase proposed, an opt-out, making it easier to take it to a vote of the people. Taken together is my hope that there can be a package of things that could potentially get the votes to provide some real relief. But, the discussion over these things, it's the same discussion really as what we've heard with you guys asking our Senate colleagues about what's going on over there. It's a civics lesson. The founders intentionally made it hard to get things done. And we have separation of powers. And you've got to be able to round up enough people to reach consensus on things. And a lot of that is done, after hours, making friendships with people, making people see they can trust you. And so all those kinds of things we've worked really hard at in the House this year, just because we understand it's nothing that any one person can force through.
I would just add to that I've always said since we started the property tax task force this summer that if we're talking about meaningful property tax reform, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, and that, in my opinion, requires a major reform in the way that we fund education. I brought a bill to do that. It was Senate Bill 200. It did not get traction, and we are where we are. I think most of the ideas that are currently being discussed nibble around the edges and don't really do anything meaningful for a long-term reform.
Are we confident that this conversation about property taxes could be wrapped up in the 2026 session, or do you envision this as an ongoing issue that will need to continue to be addressed?
Well, I think the joke was made during the task force that usually when you do a summer study on property taxes, all you accomplish is planning the next summer study on property taxes. And like I said earlier, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's going to require a major reform in the way that we fund some of our subdivisions of government. And I'll say it again, the state does not collect or spend property taxes. That's done by local governments. But the state does set the mill levy for education, and we do dole out state aid to education based on a formula. And that's where, in my opinion, that's where the rubber hits the road on making something transformative happen. But doing things that are transformative are hard.
And people are, it's going to be partly a discussion with things coming out of this session, and as soon as we have sine die, people's attention is and should be turning to our governor race and starting to take the measure of the candidates for governor and see who has the vision for dealing with property tax relief that the folks decide on. And so, yeah, that conversation's definitely gonna go on, and it's gonna be part of the governor race.
Mr. Overweg, you just had a bill in your committee about the cruelty towards animals. Part of the big argument was that this is nothing new, just simply differentiating the tiers of animal cruelty. But a lot of the arguments were brought up about all these newfound litigation. And of course, talking to the sponsor, she felt like that didn't make sense since it's not adding any new kinds of topics to the penalties, just a differentiation in penalties. So, point being, why did that become the main argument of why y'all voted no on that bill?
Well, those are really hard bills. The senator that took that bill, her heart was right. I mean, she was, and what happened to this one individual horse was horrendous. But we have to remember, we represent this state as legislators, and we are an ag state. It's our number one industry. And people that aren't in agriculture don't always understand everything that we do in a day-to-day, on our day-to-day work. Some things could be judged by people who have no idea what farming and ranching is like, that could be sadistic what we do to our animals. So the committee, the Ag Committee in the House is a very good committee. It's a lot of ag people on it. So they know that not everybody, just because you're charged, then you have to defend yourself. And this is what the other side wants from us. This is how they start crumbling the cookie. But we make our living in this state over animals. And if you know any farmers or ranchers, they risk their lives every year in snowstorms. It's the cows, the livestock is their property, and they treat them with respect as much as they can. But not everybody can understand how we have to do our job. And that's, I think, what the committee's view was, that, yes, what happened to this horse was horrible, but we didn't want to be involving our ag business in this state into those laws by putting laws up that just could be interpreted 100 different ways.
And she said the bill should have gone to judiciary, but she claimed that you asked for it with pretty much the intention to kill it. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I didn't. I asked for it, yes. I asked the speaker that I thought the Ag Committee would be the right committee for this bill. I didn't ask for it to kill it. That's a little bit overstatement. I asked for it because I knew the members of the House Ag Committee could handle this and had a better outlook over the whole view than anybody else in judiciary would have had. That's why I asked for it to come here.
I want to go back to the property tax thing. You got the governor's bill, which is the county sales tax, and then you got the city sales tax, which is Jameson's bill. I think they're both still alive. Is that if they both, is there, theoretically, they could both get to the finish line, but is there a political appetite for that? And does that feel like piling on? If you give both governments the ability, and why not throw in schools?
Well, I think that's a very good question, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the education funding that is the most volatile piece at play. And that's why in the counties or the school districts where you've had the exponential increases in owner-occupied property values, to me, that's the main driver, because we're setting the mill levy locally, then we're setting it statewide and applying it locally, and sometimes they don't measure up, and that's what's creating some of these terrible hot spots. I think that's the biggest piece of volatility. So your question, yeah, why not school districts? That's a good question. I think that makes more sense than municipalities and counties, but we don't have that bill before us now. But again, I think what we're doing is just nibbling around the edges.
I think it's correct to say that all roads to long-term structural property tax relief run through taking a look at school funding and how much we spend on that model. I had asked the LRC to give me some numbers this fall, and I don't have them here with me, but it's a significant since, I think it was 22 through 26. We were up like $770 million year over year compared to what we were spending annually in 22 to where we're at in 26 on K-12 spending, and yet enrollment is flat and the trend line is down, and this year we're down 15.5 million in state aid because around 2,700 fewer kids are attending. So you take a look at trends, you take a look at what parents are doing with homeschooling, you look at what AI is doing, you look at some of the smaller models like micro schools or private schools and doing it for way less money and just making it be a model based on smaller, everything smaller and more interfacing with kids. We've got to start looking at those solutions. Clearly 80% or whatever of our kids are in the public school. People are doing the Lord's work in those places too. And so the individuals in the institutions, I think vast majority are great-hearted people doing the Lord's work, but we need to take a look at the model, the big expensive model that we have for delivering public education under Article 8 of the Constitution, and that has to be a big piece as the conversations go forward.
We will have today modify the provisions for a refund of taxes to disabled veterans and surviving spouses under certain property tax relief programs. There are a lot of property tax relief programs out there right now. We're looking at them all, and we're not going to be able to sit here today and tell you exactly what's going to come out of the session because we still have 8 days left. We'll figure it out in the next 8 days, but we're going to have other things coming up that you didn't ask about. The App Store Accountability Act, which is giving parents a simple privacy protective way to keep their kids safe online. There's going to be one from the Right to Life people, an act to amend the definition of an abortion. The interesting thing about this is we get a chance to talk about a lot of different things. And are we subject matter experts? Probably not, but we are citizen-led. We have doctors, lawyers, accountants, we have retired people, we have just a variety of people. So we really have a chance to listen to a lot of people. But the bottom line on all the things that we're talking about is if, even the controversy things that you talked about earlier, we need to listen to both sides. We need to look at this stuff, and we need to remember that we're here to protect our constituents, to protect the great state of South Dakota, and we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And then if we're doing something, we should be able to explain it to our constituents why we voted the way we did. And if you cannot explain to your constituents why you're doing the job you're doing, maybe you shouldn't be doing this job.
us know when you're ready. Are you guys ready? Are we ready? Okay, sorry, I thought I asked if ready and people were kind of doing other things. Anyway, good morning. Hello, this is Liz Larson here, Senate District 10. Thank you for coming here and listening to our spiel. Our caucus spent another week in committee and on the floor fighting for affordability, education, child care, which often seems like an uphill battle, and it certainly seemed like an uphill battle this week. Yesterday, my bill, Senate Bill 213, was tabled without allowing committee discussion or rebuttal in joint appropriations. And that decision speaks volumes about the priorities of our colleagues in the majority party. 213 would have addressed one of our long-standing #1 issues in our state, which I hear about in my district more often than I hear about property tax, and that's childcare. So as you know, childcare is both an affordability and a workforce issue. And for the 80% of South Dakotans who have more than one person, more than one adult working in the home, outside the home, this is very, affordable childcare is a top issue. It remains a top issue. So Senate Bill 213 would have created the Building Opportunity Through Out-of-School Time program, which would have expanded out-of-school, after-school, summer care programs that help kids stay safe and give working parents some breathing room. It's a common sense, reasonable proposal focused squarely on families. It was about helping parents who are juggling the costs of childcare as well as trying to hold down employment at the same time. So our colleagues across the aisle shut that down. And this kind of fits the pattern that we've been seeing all session, which is, the Democratic caucus is trying to introduce different things that affect the affordability for our constituents. We have introduced the repeal of the grocery tax 3 times this session. Why? Because we know that families are facing real affordability issues every time they check out at the grocery store. Our colleagues across the aisle are focused on tax relief every election cycle, but when it comes to lowering costs in a meaningful way, this legislature does not act. And at the same time, we're seeing a number of bills which restrict personal freedom, and as my caucus mates will here explain. So we are still here offering reasonable common sense solutions to reduce everyday expenses and support kids and parents. And we are squashed the majority of the time. And South Dakotans deserve better than that. And I'll hand it over to my colleagues to explain a little more.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Eric Mucky, District 15, downtown North Central Sioux Falls. As a member of the Joint Committee on Appropriations, some good proposals made it through, but the vast majority of very good ideas were sent to a table, and I'm disappointed to hear that. And I'm disappointed to see that action from my colleagues, but I also want to highlight something very important about this week. House Republicans had a clear opportunity to pass a tax bill this week, House Bill 1308B. This was a bipartisan effort to bring forward tax relief to 100% of South Dakotans in some format, whether it's the elimination of the sales tax on food and food ingredients or on owner-occupied property taxes. This is a very well thought, very well balanced solution that provided tax relief while sustainably funding education, Medicaid, state workforce. And I'm really grateful for the work of our Representative Tim Sosmowski from District 6, who really worked hard for his constituents and worked with a variety of stakeholders, especially the Democratic caucus, in finding a good policy that makes sense for South Dakotans. Instead of working with us, unfortunately, current and former House GOP leadership killed a meaningful tax policy that would have offered tax relief for 100% of South Dakotans and responsibly funded state government because of their own partisan, petty bickering. HB 1308B was a serious and workable plan that would have provided relief at the checkout line and addressed the property tax question once and for all from this particular time. And then we hear Republicans talk about tax relief every campaign season. When they were faced with an opportunity to lower costs for South Dakotans, every single one, especially those owner-occupied homeowners who would also have seen relief at the grocery store, it was extraordinarily disappointing to watch them not just vote against it, but turn against their own colleagues within their own party and turn against the people of South Dakota in such a disgraceful fashion. I'm frankly disgusted with how that went. That same day, House GOP leadership chose not to move forward with a proposal that would have helped first-time home buyers with down payment assistance at a time when housing costs are already so high for our working South Dakotans. If we are serious about strengthening our workforce and supporting the next generation, helping people achieve home ownership in a meaningful fashion should be a very vital goal. Unfortunately, while preaching that the Housing Infrastructure Fund should not be tampered with, the same House GOP leaders intend to gut that fund for a property tax rebate program on a one-time basis that has absolutely no plan sustainably to not just make that rebate consistent or deal with the systemic tax changes that South Dakotans deserve from their legislature to actually deal with seriously. I'm, again, disgusted. These actions to play politics at the expense of the taxpayer is really disappointing for South Dakotans, and it's not the work of our caucus. We brought responsible solutions forward, and we found fiscally sound ways to make that work for the taxpayer while still providing relief. Unfortunately, we got to see at play a governor's race play into the decisions in the House that are putting the taxpayers second and putting politics first. And I'm extremely disappointed. When given the choice between lowering costs for families or escalating political fights, House Republicans chose politics and division. That's what they did. And frankly, I'm also disappointed in how they treated their own colleagues within their own party in doing so. Now, I will say, I want to speak to one of the few remaining property tax bills that are still available, the current governor's tax bill. And Governor Roden tried to find a local solution, and I'm grateful that he's looking at that. I do have my concerns in the sense that I think the challenge with that bill is that not every county is going to need tax relief for residential purposes. There are certain parts of South Dakota where tax relief might be necessary for other types of property, commercial or agricultural. And that's the main concern that I have at this moment in time, and that'll be an ongoing conversation with our caucus. I think trying to find localized solutions is a worthy goal. But again, I can't say enough. House Bill 1308B was the most promising property tax solution we've seen come out of this legislature. Bipartisan, negotiated, thoughtful, fiscally sound. And it was extremely disappointing to watch infighting within the House Republican caucus turn that into a show and turn their backs on their own and their own caucus while we put, again, the South Dakota taxpayer second, politics first. And so I know I have to run to votes for JCA. We're in the final day of moving bills. And so I'm happy to answer questions outside of this, but I have to leave at this time. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. House Minority Leader Erin Healy from District 10. This week, House Republicans pushed through a lot of unnecessary legislation surrounding abortion and another one targeting transgender South Dakotans. It was nearly unanimous. It was almost strictly party line. I think this should really alarm anyone who cares about democracy and freedom and keeping politicians out of our private lives. This is exactly why people are fed up with politics. Because Republicans would rather obsess about identity politics than do the hard work to help families and improving care. These bills reach deep into people's medical decisions, their families, and their identities, yet the majority didn't even believe those consequences warranted serious consideration. And I know that for a fact because there are numerous Republicans who said they didn't like these bills, but they still decided to vote for them. We owe the public some honesty about what's happening here. Republicans love to campaign on freedom, on limited government and being pro-life, but how pro-life are we actually when the legislature is already overwhelmingly pro-life? And at what cost? When does this stop being about helping patients and helping women and helping families? And when does it start being about political control? This legislature is so eager to interfere, they're eager to punish and score political expenses at the expense of real people and real South Dakotans. And I know, like I said, I know for a fact that there are people who voted the wrong way, and they know they did. They're playing with people's lives as if it doesn't matter, but it does, and it makes a huge impact on people's lives. These bills don't expand freedom or liberty, they restrict it, they don't protect privacy. They invite the government directly into exam rooms, into homes, into personal identities. Democrats believe that freedom means trusting people to make their own healthcare decisions and to make their own decisions about their identities. What we see is expanding power at the expense of individual freedom, and Democrats will never stand for that. We will always continue to oppose that. And with that, I think we're ready to answer questions.
So I'll go ahead and get the big question out of the way. Interesting week for the Senate. So Senator Larson, tell me a little bit about what's your take on what we witnessed in the Senate on crossover day?
Well, I learned so many new motions this week that I'd never heard invoked since I've been elected to the Senate. We did a call to the House, we did call to question, and a bunch of different maneuvers. There was a member absent. We had to go and find that member or attempt to, and then there was a motion to read an entire bill on the floor, which was 15 pages. So there was just a number of different distractions going on as Republicans were kind of fighting on a number of different bills. It was interesting, I will say that. But usually the Senate is not as dramatic, but certainly was this week.
I know I'm a representative and not a senator, but from our perspective, we've always heard about this tool in the rulebook. In the past, there have been representatives who have chosen to not show up for a vote, and they've hidden in the Capitol. So we've never gotten to the point where we're actually calling them back to the floor. But the Speaker of the House, and I can't remember who it was at the time, just marked them as absent instead of excused. But I do think that it leads to a bigger point of Democrats never misbehave. We are here to work for the people, and we will always show up to vote.
It's a part of the job, we have to show up. I mean, when a legislator doesn't do that, I don't know,
It's disruptive.
not good.
Obviously, people made it a point to call into question the whole debate about whether the lieutenant governor should have that authority to break the tie in the Senate. What's your opinion on that?
You know, I don't really have a dog in the fight. I mean, I would go with what the Supreme Court, that seems like the most, the best explained answer that has the most, thoughtful, experienced opinion behind it. So I would just go with that and move on based on that knowledge.
Does this kind of dysfunction among the GOP caucuses benefit you guys politically come the election?
That's a good question. And there could be a lot of different answers and different ways to look at that. I don't look at it as being a positive for either them or us, really. I think that it's negative for the people of South Dakota. I mean, in the ideal world, there would be two parties that were somewhat equal and steel sharpens steel and iteration between the two competing units that would be more equal. That's kind of what our two-party system is designed to invoke or inspire in our communities. But with this, we've got one tiny party, which is us, and then we've got a large party, which has now divided itself into different factions, informally and formally. And I just think the people of South Dakota are the ones losing. And I don't really think we gain much.
Yeah, I think this is Republicans eating Republicans, and the best thing that we can do is bring it back to the people, elect better people to represent that aren't going to misbehave. I mean, we've talked about misbehaving numerous times this session. And I feel like we have to hold people accountable for their actions. And I would love to get back to policy and helping South Dakotans, but it does interfere with everybody's lives when these kinds of things happen.
Can you name 10 House members you'd like to get rid of?
No, thank you.
So admittedly, I work out of the Senate every day, so I can't speak for the House, but how are you feeling in regards to the functionality of South Dakota government in 2026? Is what you're seeing disappointing, upsetting? Are you happy with where we're at? Just what are you seeing?
I guess it depends on what we're talking about. So when it comes to actual floor procedure, that's going really well. We got through crossover day, I want to say by 4:30, and that's incredible. I've been here years where it's been past midnight. When it comes to behavior, there's a lot of work to be done. I think there's a lot of there are behaviors that are clouding judgment of other representatives. And like I said, it's a distraction to everybody because now we have to deal with something, or now the Senate is having to deal with so many bill or floor votes or having to wait around. And it's really disheartening, and it makes our jobs harder when that frustration just builds and builds.
So obviously Representative Mucky mentioned 1308. I had spoken with Representative Sismowski after, and he said his biggest concern was that was one of the last bills left for property tax, meaningful property tax relief. I guess where does your caucus, where does your caucus see property tax relief heading, and is this going to be a year where meaningful relief can be achieved for homeowner occupied?
I think 1308 was the best option we had. And once we couldn't fit in that relief for a lot of, probably 30 to 40% of South Dakotans that actually need that relief on food, it wasn't a deal for us anymore. We still want to pass something, but there aren't any good options in front of us at this moment in time.
I would agree. There's just not any good options that are left alive that address taxes in an equitable way.
Safe to say you think we're going to be having this exact same conversation in 2027?
Yes.
I don't know. I would say the predictions are always very different than what is actually talked about when the session starts. So it'll also depend on who's elected in the next election. So
I've always wondered, when you hear about this being an issue that people talk about all the time, what is going wrong? Because obviously lawmakers came to this year talking a big game. And, then all of a sudden I feel like we realize it's only 9 weeks and then we have to wait till the next year. So is it a longer legislative session? Is it what exactly would be substantially helpful to ensure that we don't just come into session and then it flies by and we have to wait till the year after?
I have a couple of comments on that. There's not one easy answer for that, but a lot of times I've heard the analogy that, government is the three-legged stool. You've got your judiciary, you've got your legislative, and then you've got your executive branch. In South Dakota, because we have 2-year terms, we have the shortest legislative session of any state, we have the smallest LRC, we sort of have these two legs that are the executive and the judiciary that are this big, and then we have like a little nubbin of legislative branch. And so, that's gonna be kind of tippy, in my personal opinion, if terms were a little bit longer and then we don't have to campaign so quickly, if our session was a little bit longer, it would be better for the people of South Dakota, because like you're saying, we get in this cycle of hurry up and predict of all these things that you're gonna vote on and how they'll be beneficial, and then sometimes it's a little bit of a disappointment. I just think that we could have more time to have better policy that was more well thought out and evidence-based if we had a little bit more time and resources to do it.
I also wish we had a serious task force last summer, but that task force ended up not being a serious task force when it comes to property tax relief. When you recommend just cutting taxes in a variety of different areas, that's just not realistic. So I think if we actually had a group of people from different different on the political spectrum, we'd be able to come up with a better solution. But we didn't see that last summer.
Senator, you said that you thought a longer session would be better for the people of South Dakota. Is that with this legislature?
Well, that's an interesting question. That would be a hypothetical. I think with any legislature, a longer time would be better, but I also think that different people would be attracted to the roles if it was a little bit more, if they could either work on it full-time without having to volunteer or something like that. There was a little bit more, I don't know, weight given to it.
Yeah, we're a citizen legislature, so I always like to say that the more businesses that are supportive of legislators that look like Senator Larson and I, the better off we're going to be when it comes to getting good people to represent. When you have companies that are allowing legislators to go do their job, you're going to get a better variety of people here.
I guess I'll throw one in. So obviously, crossover day, the big thing was the holdup on data center incentives. Do you believe at this point that conversation's done for this legislature? That maybe besides some of the protections, but the actual incentives, do you think that's over and done for this year?
It might be. It might also come back. I think that we haven't heard the last of data centers in general, but I don't know what aspects of that will come back. But I do think we'll be talking about it some more.
There are still some vehicle bills out there, so, I mean, it's not, it could happen. Anything else? Thanks, everyone. Have a great
guys.
day.